Hi, my name is Crystal Tremack, and I'm so excited that you are here today and that I'm sharing in your journey towards your next level. First, congratulations on the journey towards your next level. Second, I'd like to share a little bit about my story and how I ended up in front of you here today. So, for all of you that are ready, type ready in the chat and let's go. I'm going to start with a quote that I remember from when I was a little girl, even before I ever even started school. I remember my mom said to me, "Do you have McDonald's money?" Now, I want you to think about that because some of you may be very familiar with such a similar term or maybe even the exact term and know exactly what I'm talking about. It plays importance because I believe it really shaped some of my decisions along the way and how I ended up where I am today. As a first generation college student and former student athlete, I don't remember having the plan in place when others would ask me what it is that I wanted to do after graduation. I naturally wanted to go to college because that's what everyone else was doing. I didn't have the necessary dream of wanting to make so many millions of dollars or so much money or even exactly what I wanted to do. What I knew I wanted was to be able to do some of the things that I enjoyed from time to time, have a home to stay in, a reliable car, and not struggle to pay my bills. I enjoyed being an athlete and thought that I would want to serve and continue to work with athletes after graduating high school and college. I thought the best way to do that was to become a physical therapist. So I set out on my journey to college and my academic career and training to become a physical therapist. I quickly realized that the demands of the department to obtain my physical therapy degree and compete and fulfill my obligations as a full-time, full scholarship student athlete caused a challenge to say the least. I had a mentor after my first semester come to me and tell me that I could switch to a different department and pursue a different degree plan that would allow me to still meet the same requirements required to go on and obtain my physical therapy degree at a later date. I successfully navigated the new department and found it worked out a lot better with my challenges as far as my schedule and my ability to navigate through the academic process. What I didn't realize is that the new degree plan called for the first level of majority of the classes. To go on to graduate level education, you needed the second level of those same courses. And I graduated without having those or even being wiser nonetheless. After I graduated, I returned home to my parents' house and quickly realized I had so much time on my hands because I've been used to training and competing for so many years that I didn't know what to do. I make the joke that my parents are enablers, and I believe that if I wanted to stay with them from that day to this one and continue to not pay any bills, they would have allowed me to do that with no problem. So I'll say that's one of the reasons I joined the military because I needed to find my own way. The second reason, and the reason that I normally start off with, is boredom. I was so bored being there and not having any responsibilities that I knew going into the military would give me a few opportunities to develop some additional skills and address some other gaps that would allow me to get out there and get on my own towards living as an adult and getting started with the best foundation from the start. Some of the things I knew the military could do for me was put money in my pocket, food on the table, a roof over my head, and pay for additional schooling. I really enjoyed leaving the undergraduate level without having any debt and wanted to continue that on as I continued to pursue my physical therapy degree. When I initially went to the recruiter, I desired to spend as least time as possible on active duty while obtaining all the things that I set out to obtain. I quickly realized that most of the jobs that I was interested in were not jobs that fell in the least amount of time. So I found a job that was in a happy medium for me that required me to enlist for an initial 4-year term. Now, if you've served in your military or you have family members serving in the military, you may have heard, I'm doing my first term and I'm out. I'm doing 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or 6 years even, which is a longer term for a first term, and I'm out. Yes, I was one of those people that said, I'm doing my 4 years and I'm out. As I went on the journey, I quickly realized that I had something to offer the military and they had something to offer me. I was getting promoted quickly and ahead of my peers and realized I was adding value to the organization as they were also adding value to me. And I would stay on much longer than my first term. During this time, I went into many different environments that opened up many doors for me. And I decided to commission shortly after my first term. I switched from being a medical specialist, which is what they sold me on when I went to the recruiting station, to what I later found out was called a combat medic when I showed up in training. Now, I don't know about you, but that terminology sounds much different when you hear them in different ways. But anyway, as I went on to commission and became a medical service corps officer, I continued on my journey, still working in the same type of environments, but now at a different level, as a different level of leader. When you get around your 8th or 9th year, you start to have the conversations with others who say, what are your plans? Are you going to separate? Are you going to stay in? Because you're at the point where you could go to a full retirement, which at the time was 20 years, that would allow you to retire with a retirement check for the rest of your life. So I decided that I would go for the full retirement. Around year 14, I was close to consideration for promotions in the next grade and also had the opportunity to be selected to attend a fully funded educational civilian program while still receiving my military check. Unfortunately, because the military plussed up so greatly during the conflict, the extended conflict that happened shortly after I joined the Army, when September 11 happened, the Congress mandated that the Department of Defense needed to shrink, and there goes downsizing. I was one of the individuals that was selected in the downsizing and had to separate approximately 4.5 years earlier than I planned. Well, I don't know about you, when others change plans for you, that does make a difference in what you're planning to do. Now, as I mentioned before, I wanted to be the person that could pay my bills and do things that I enjoyed doing, having reliable transportation, and a place to stay. I had all of those things. One of the challenges that I used more money than I would typically use beyond my comfort level to do some different things within my new home, knowing that I was preparing for a promotion, at least 1 to 2 more promotions before I met the 20-year retirement goal that I was on. Unfortunately, this shift in plan, mandated by the Department of Defense and implemented as the services decide to do so, threw a wrench in that plan. I started to prepare for transition, and as I transitioned, my first day of retirement was at the beginning of the winter season. Now, what do we know about winter? During the winter months, things slow down. Yes, it's pretty, and yes, it's nice to slow down when you have things in place. It's much different when you don't have things in place. So what does the slowdown impact during a time when you're in transition from downsizing or being laid off, or what other terminology results in you not getting a paycheck ultimately? Agencies typically hire less during the winter months as well. They allow their employees to take more time off. Their employees are going on more vacations, taking more just breathers and getting ready to hit the ground running for the new year. Another challenge during that time, the government was in the middle of a hiring freeze. The hiring freeze started immediately after I retired from the United States Army. What does the hiring freeze mean, and what's the big deal? The hiring freeze stopped the federal government from being able to bring on new employees during that time. I also had, as a former service member, as a veteran or retiree, the allowance of educational benefits that would have provided me a monthly stipend that I could have used to pay for household expenses. However, what else slows down during the winter? Schools go on break. So That was also a dead end. I didn't have the ability to take on that money that I normally would have had that would have made the transition a little smoother. When you retire from the military, you do not immediately start getting any checks the first month or two that you're out. It takes some time. They have a checks and balance system that has to be done before you ever get your first paycheck. For those of us that receive veterans disability compensation, that also is not an instantaneous thing. That can be a few months to years before you ever get a payment in that. So what did that leave me with during my transition to take care of myself and my family? To rely heavily on credit card usage. Now, I'm typically a person that does not like to go into debt and use the credit cards the way I had to use them at that time. However, as life called for it, I was in a position that I had not anticipated or planned to be in, or desired, of course, to be in. I know that my story may resonate with some of you because you've experienced it, or hopefully you won't go through it and you'll be better prepared for it on the other side, should any of those things ever come knocking at your door. I started to apply for various different positions because I was looking for a paycheck. I did find some opportunities to take time until something else started to come in and the government was able to rehire. During that process of your transition and your preparation, the uniformed services do have a transition program set up. Now, I will tell you that there are a lot of things being thrown at you. There's a lot of information that you're receiving at this time. And some of it, frankly, let's be real, does not work. It's not practical. It looks good on paper, but when you put it into practice, it does not yield the fruit of what we want and what we need. I remember being younger and hearing others say that if you got a federal job, that was a big deal. That was a secure position. That was a top-notch job to go after. So knowing that was in the back of my mind, and also as a military member who had been around the federal government for over half of my working career at this point, and just knowing that naturally either people run as far as they can away from the government after military service, and some come back, or they go naturally into another federal position. When I initially started applying for federal positions, I wasn't getting any type of movement whatsoever. Now, that might be some of the story that you all have experienced or heard as well. So one of the myths that I will tell you about no movement on those applications when you submit is, number one, you have to know someone. It is not about who you know. As someone who had served in the military at that point for over 15 years, almost 16 years, I knew a lot of people. I knew a lot of people that were still in uniform, that supervised civilians or work with civilians. I knew a lot of civilians, to include ones in my very own neighborhood, as being in the DC metropolitan area and all the federal positions that are here and accessible. It's not about who you know. I had many individuals volunteer to look over my resume and others' resumes around me, and we never heard from them again. Or they didn't have the influence or the knowledge to do anything to be of value to you to help you land your federal position as desired. The second myth that I've heard is that you're using the right resume. What I found is out of 95% of the time when I request a client send me a copy of the resume they are using to apply for positions with the federal government, I realize that they do not have the appropriate resume. And that's why the resumes not getting attention and moving on to the next stage for even the hiring official to even consider you, let alone call you in for an interview and ultimately provide a job offer. The third myth I've heard, I've done everything and I cannot get into the federal government. There is absolutely no way you've done everything, because if that were the case, at some point you would have landed your ultimate desire of obtaining federal employment. So there's no way, unless they're barring some significant things that are the exceptions to the norm, there's no way that you're just not getting the position because you've tried everything. So what I had to do was seek out a mentor who looked over my resume, and he quickly said, It has nothing to do with your work experience. As I'm looking at your resume, you do not have a lack of experience. That is not the challenge you're having. He offered a few suggestions to make tweaks to my resume, and I took that information as well as other information I learned along the way and continued to build on it and successfully landed multiple job offers. Well, I'll back up, multiple interviews, multiple job offers, and multiple opportunities to negotiate my federal salary. And I entered into my first federal position a few short months after I retired and the hiring freeze was lifted. Now, had I listened to some of those other individuals who have their own knowledge of their own personal experience, where they may not have the same desires to move about, they're complacent where they are, they're not seeking out promotion opportunities, the desire to change career fields, or a certain level of salary is acceptable to them, I would have come in at a much lower grade and still been sitting in one of those positions today. Using the information that I had and my desire, I've successfully landed a senior federal position and coached several individuals into higher positions as well as career changes. One, to even have some of them doubling the salary that they were making prior to them coming into the federal government. One individual in particular, she had been in her career field for over 30 years and was able to essentially double her annual income in less than 6 months through my coaching and strategy to get her into the federal government. Not only did my coaching and strategy get her into the federal government, it allowed her to change career fields and obtain her veterans disability and compensation, return to school, and continue to build her skills to open up more opportunities for her along the way. If either of us or any of us would have sat back and listened to the naysayers, we would still be in the same position with them or where we were personally without them, with no movement towards where we like to go. I've heard people say for years that they've been trying to get into the government and they choose not to do anything different from year to year, but say they've tried. And when you really get down to it and you have those individual conversations, trying means something different to everyone. How you strategize applying for federal employment is not the same as how you go about applying for private sector employment. It is a completely different process, and taking one from one to the other does not yield the best results. Another challenge that I faced during my transition was that I needed to file my veteran compensation disability. I went to one of the local service providers that we are often referred to and expected some assistance with filing my claim. What I was left with was, what are you claiming? Well, I was left a little bit dumbfounded because I didn't find that appointment to be very useful at all. And so I turned and looked at my husband and we decided to leave. I gathered my own application and compiled my records and all the information I needed and submitted my own claim, resulting in 100% total and permanent disability from my first time applying to obtain my veterans compensation. Now, I've heard the story of those that are intimidated by the process, don't believe they qualify for anything, and have had to refile and fight for 20, 30, 40 years. I've heard the ones who don't believe that they are eligible because of how, I will say the old school way of thinking when we served in the military. And I know if it was the way that it was when I was in, I can only imagine how it was before that. I remember that going to sick call, which is where you go to seek out your medical appointments, or going to medical appointments, was frowned upon. You heard things like sick call ranger, meaning that this person always went to sick call to get out of work. You heard things like a malingerer. So they didn't believe their medical issues were real, that they were just making them up so they could just continue to get out of work and still get paid. And being a part of a medical unit, and sometimes others experience it as well, we went through self-treatment, whether you tried to fix it yourself or someone within your unit tried to fix it. With the self-treatment comes lack of documentation. There is no documentation on file to show that you've had any proof of treatment or actually needed anything or went through anything. Also, how we think about it is if we didn't go downrange, we didn't deploy and have a catastrophic visible event happen to us that we are not eligible, or for some feel that you're not worthy to take, or you're taking something away from someone else that deserves it. None of those things could be further from the truth. We have gone through a significant thing that the majority of the private civilian population will never experience or never have been exposed to. And when we signed our name on the dotted line, we allowed someone else to make decisions for us because we volunteered to be told when, where, and what to do, where to go, what to do, and even how to think. Whereas on the private side, we would have been able to decline certain things, participate in certain things, or not taking the time out to care for ourselves. It's time to shift your thought process and how you believe the Veterans Disability Compensation process works and the resources that are out there available to you. There are so many resources available to you that work well in conjunction with additional guidance from mentors and coaches that are out there readily available and willing to assist. Now, I'll tell you, as a student athlete, that is something that I found great value in, having a coach. Yes, I could be one of the fastest person with the most talent. But if I don't have anyone to give me coaching and guidance along the way, it's only going to take me so far. Some of the things that having a coach can do is allowing you to get there faster, avoid some of the pitfalls, and also see where your blind spots are. They're able to have candid, open conversations with you to allow you to think about things in a way that you never thought about before. This is a great opportunity to continue on your journey towards your next level federal career, your next level veterans compensation, your next level connection to benefits and resources. Let's talk about some of the benefits. As a private sector employee, you have time off. Most of the time, I found that time off will be one set time that includes your holidays, your federal holidays, your sick leave, and your personal vacation time. One of the benefits of being a government employee is that those are separate leave categories. There is time off for the federal government that we all get. There is the ability to take sick leave that's separate from your annual leave. And there are other times that you can receive awards for performance that allow you to obtain additional time off. Some of the things that being a federal employee does is also matches your contributions to your thrift savings plan, which some employers do with a similar thing as 401k, but they don't match at as high as rate as what the federal government does. Some of the benefits of having veterans disability compensation is that you don't have to pay property taxes depending on where you live and what the requirement is in your area when you make a certain percentage, when you receive a certain percentage for veterans disability compensation. One of the greatest benefits for us is that our son gets to go to school essentially free. The state covers his tuition and fees, and then he is given a monthly stipend as long as he's in school for that first 36 months to 4 years that will allow him to obtain his undergraduate degree or use towards a graduate degree, essentially debt-free. There are so many benefits out there that you are leaving on the table by being scared, not getting connected to the right resources, or not doing something different than you've done before. What I'm calling you to do is to follow me on all social media platforms at Crystal She Speaks, and let's get connected and strategize your journey to your next level federal career, your next level career, your 6-figure salary, and your veterans benefits. It's been a pleasure talking with you all, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share. And I'm looking forward to you reaching out to me. When you reach out to me, make sure to acknowledge today and say ready. And I have something special for each and every one of you. Take care, and I'll see you on the other side. Crystal She Speaks on all social media platforms. Bye.